I find that my people often need to be reassured that their lord cares about them, and not just the holdings they keep. I'm sure there's not much difference in the south. Try to talk to them, Stannis. Small things, about their lives and the lives of their families. Ask them about their small concerns, small problems, and try to solve them if they ask for your opinion. Only if they ask, however. Some people simply wish to share their burdens, not be told by a stranger on how to handle them. You'll be shaking your head of scoffing at this point, I am sure. But think of it this way. Their families are important to them. They see their happiness and well-being as their responsibility, which by extension makes them your responsibility. Asking after them will not only fulfill that duty, but will also show your people that they matter to you. A two-benefit, one-cost strategic move. Show that their lives are important to you, and your life shall become important to them. An exchange of services, if you will. Now, regarding business, the architects you sent have evaluated the lands. Benjen tells me that the swamp's odor is as unpleasant as expected. However, Howland Reed, Lord of House Reed and the Greywater Watch, has promised a solution. Apparently, the Crannogmen have allowed the swamp to attain its current state, so as to discourage new residents until such a time comes when the moat is needed. When questioned about this miraculous solution, Howland simply wrote, "Fish and flow." They're a mysterious people, the Crannogmen. Even here in the north, we cannot say we understand them. Still, they know their lands, so I trust them in this matter. Furthermore, Lord Reed is a personal friend, and he'll ensure that everything goes smoothly. Most of the remaining keep must be torn down to make room for the new plans, but the land is stable and large enough to accommodate them. The construction will take years and may not be accomplished in time for the wedding, so we'll have to plan accordingly. The Northern Lords were resistant to the location and especially to the Essosi architects amongst the party you sent. Many would prefer the gift or perhaps the deserted lands along the western shore, but I know your feelings about those places. Thankfully, Howland's support stayed much of the growing dissatisfaction, and now the idea that our children will essentially be protecting the North has grown in popularity. It also doesn't hurt that you're funding much of the construction, although some are taking that as a challenge to contribute more than needed. Northmen and their pride. Jon's lessons are going well. We're taking care in teaching him High Valyrian. But he's not very enamored with languages, unfortunately. Nevertheless, he knows his duty. He'll begin practicing with a sword and bow soon, and for those, he is excited. The boy definitely has Stark blood within him. Until next time, Ned Stark. Stannis Baratheon sighed, flicking the letter away and pressing down upon his temple to halt the headache. Despite the growing contentment amongst his people, begun when he'd wed Myra and carefully cultivated since, there was still a distance between the Lord and those pledged to him. Oh, they didn't disobey him or purposefully antagonize him anymore, but Stannis found himself discontent nonetheless. Myra's advice to allow things to grow naturally, while appreciated, didn't seem to be working. Besides, a woman who'd grown up around these people and was intuitively comfortable in her role couldn't fully understand Stannis' struggle. He'd finally, begrudgingly, asked Stark's opinion on the matter. The man was a bleeding heart if Stannis ever saw one, and all reports said he was loved amongst his people. Stannis had carefully inquired into the matter in his last letter, hiding his real reasons for asking. But the damned man was getting to know Stannis too well. He grimaced in annoyance. He was getting too close, too informal with the Northern Lord. He wasn't entirely sure he liked it. Not when the man was Robert's friend, and a younger Stannis had never had good experiences with men in that particular category. Still, he unwillingly admitted, at least the advice was something he could actively apply, which appealed to him more than his wife's more passive had recommended. That matter aside, Stannis focused on the other contents. Finally, construction on the castle could truly begin. After nearly 3 years of planning, researching, preparation, and gathering talented architects from the kingdoms and Essos, things could be put into motion. Well, he amended, glaring down at the one of 3 wooden miniatures on his desk, as soon as he finally figured out where to put the blasted glass garden. He picked up a small wooden dome, the only one piece without a home, and eyed in with a frown. Winterfell had hot springs to keep the ground warm, and thus the glass garden there didn't need so much direct contact with the sun. Moat Caelan, while farther south, wasn't warm enough to support agriculture if the keep's walls blocked out the sun. But how to ensure it was still defensible and within the walls? His thoughts were interrupted by the door being pushed open, and a small silver head woven with yellow ribbons appeared. 4-year-old Daenerys paused in surprise, but looked over her shoulder before scurrying inside with a smile. She pushed the heavy door closed, needing her entire body to do so, he noted with amusement. "Cousin," she beamed, delighted, and then skipped towards him. Stannis felt his face soften. She lifted her arms, as was her habit, and he obligingly picked the girl up and deposited her on his lap. She twined her arms around his neck and hugged him tightly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pushing away. He raised an eyebrow, wondering how she knew that he was usually in council at this time, and made a look of glancing around. "This is my office, last I recall. The better question is, what is a girl who should be napping right now doing here?" He eyed her yellow nightgown pointedly. She smiled, a tiny bit sheepish. "A walk?" He squinted at her, unimpressed. "Really? And what does Myra think of this walk?" She blinked and made a show of looking around. "I don't know," she responded, tone saying it was obvious, and he was an idiot. "She's not here. Gods help her future husband." "All right, Daenerys, tell me the truth. What did?" "Daenerys Stormborn, when I find you, I swear I will make you stay indoors and recite High Valyrian for an entire week." His wife's shrill voice resonated from the hallway, sounding as if it was rapidly approaching. And in her current state, such movement was difficult, so Stannis knew she was very angry indeed. The aforementioned doomed girl's eyes widened comically from her place on his lap. "But that's not fair." She squirmed off his lap and disappeared down between his legs. He squinted at her as she crouched under the large desk, finger over her lips and looking at him pleadingly. Stannis slowly came to the realization that he'd just discovered a common hiding spot. He signed. "Do I have to make you come to the privy with me from now on?" "Do I?" Myra questioned, just outside the door. She slammed the door open. "Because I will, Stannis." At his wife's gasping surprise, he simply couldn't help himself. "Well," he responded dryly, leaning back, "while the duties of a husband are ever evolving, wife, I can assure you, accompaniment to the privy will never be one of them. It's for the survival of our marriage, you understand." A tiny giggle, quickly halted, came from under the desk. Myra's face blushed a deep crimson, but her eyes narrowed at the desk. Hair loose, and also dressed in a nightgown. This one a blue satin stomach large underneath it. Myra made a beautiful sight. His heart still ached whenever he gazed upon her. "I gather you're looking for an escaped prisoner." She glared at him, blush fading. "A nap is not a prison sentence, no matter how much Daenerys says it is. A 4-year-old needs sleep, as does an impending mother. But gods, getting her to lay down is the most challenging part of my day." She shook her head, exasperated, but there was amusement there. "I turn away for one moment and she's gone, every time. I haven't managed to find all her hiding places yet." A pause. "Sometimes," she continued guiltily, "I just give up and sleep. But she's always back when I wake up." She pointed suspiciously at the large piece of furniture in front of him. "Is she under the desk?" Myra mouthed. He gave a barely perceptible nod, knowing small violet eyes were watching him carefully. Myra huffed and rolled her eyes. Stannis frowned. "Are you sure you'd rather not hire a nurse? You should be resting at this stage. Cresson says the babe could come any day now." A small gasp from under the desk. Myra pretended she didn't hear. She sneered. "Like I'd let some stranger raise Daenerys. No, I will take care of her and our children myself." Stannis gave up. This was always a touchy subject for his wife. He got the feeling she hadn't had the best experiences in childhood. But Myra was a private woman, and she always told him personal matters slowly. He understood. He hadn't told her all about his childhood yet either. What she did know made her angry and hateful towards Robert, an attitude that he couldn't allow her to foster, lest it came out one day before the king. Although I secretly love how protective she is, Stannis hadn't seen his brother since that day at the feast, and the king had sent John Arryn his hand in his place for Stannis' wedding. He'd been thankful things were finally smoothing between him and his lords, and he didn't need Robert's presence at the wedding to ruin things with Myra and with the men who'd finally begun to differentiate the brothers. What about Dernier? She'd be happy to come here for a few weeks? She shook her head. My sister has her own household to run now. She's expecting as well, she smiled, pleased with the news. My congratulations, he said automatically. He was quite pleased, as he'd found the girl to share many characteristics with his wife. It made him wonder how many high-born women from his childhood he'd simply written off as aloof or simple due to their practiced courtly manners. I need to work on that. Dernier had married into House Sunglass to the eldest son of Lord Gunser. The marriage had occurred to reaffirm the bond between the two Crownland houses. Sunglass, a deeply pious house, had given Stannis 3 galleys for his fleet. The number of ships under his rule were quickly increasing, and they now had warships, trading ships, fishing ships, and travel ships which ferried passengers around Westeros and across the Narrow Sea. With the willing help of the lords and knights and their contributions to the mining effort, precious stones, minerals, fish, and transport were quickly making Dragonstone rich. Soon he hoped to acquire a master smith to see what he could do with the mysterious metal they'd recently found in the southern mines. So far, the orange and red stone was proving difficult to smelt. It's too light to be useful for armor, my lord, but perhaps cookware for the small folk, or so the blacksmith said. Is that another letter from Lord Stark? Myra asked, slowly sitting herself. Did you finally decide on a location then? He nodded towards the central miniature. Moat Cailin. She wrinkled her nose. The swamp. Really, Stannis, couldn't you find a better place? Sending a princess to a smelly swamp. Swamp? Questioned a tiny voice under the table, sounding as if she were also wrinkling her nose. He sighed. It was between it, the Gift, and Sea Dragon Point. All locations had their downsides, but this one had the least. Besides, apparently, House Reed knows how to take care of the smell. It seems to have been purposeful rather than natural occurrence. Myra continued, frowning. What about that river you told me about? Fever River? I don't like Daenerys near such a place. Another purposeful ruse, apparently. These Cranod men like visitors even less than I do. Who knows how far they've gone to maintain their sole dominion over the neck. She apparently didn't like that he had an answer for everything, but Moat Cailin to Stannis was simply the best choice. Like he'd trust Ned's bastard to grow up able to properly defend a keep. No, the boy needed all the advantage he could, and Stannis would ensure no army would ever be able to threaten Daenerys' home and drive her to starvation and desperation. That no man would ever have the small girl hiding under the desk at his mercy because her home couldn't defend her. The Gift and Sea Dragon Point were much too dangerous, plagued by those scoundrels of the Night's Watch and the savages beyond the wall and the pillaging rapists of the Iron Islands. He'd read the histories of the North and these ridiculous kings beyond the wall. No way was his ward going to be the first line of defense against them. And there was a reason so much of the western shore of the North was empty, with those fucking pirates roaming the sea. In the moat, they'll be able to escape no matter which side seeks to attack them. Besides, White Harbor is a few days' ride away. You, he cleared his throat awkwardly, will be able to visit her as often as you desire. An amused light of understanding filled her eyes, and he cursed internally. Ah, I see. Yes, of course, I will certainly wish to visit her often. All by myself, of course, for my lord husband will simply be too busy with his duties. She reached across and patted his hand mockingly. Don't worry, Stannis, my love. I won't force you to come and visit Daenerys with me. An offended gasp from under the table. A small fist hit his leg in retaliation. Damn it, woman, you know I'll be joining you whenever you go, he hissed. Yes, all right. The ease of which we can arrive there was a major part of my consideration. Are you happy? An apologetic pat on his leg. She leaned forward and kissed him softly on the lips, and he quickly gave in, as he always did. Another giggle under the table, and he pulled away quickly. Myra grinned and sat back. It may not even happen, he admitted with a sigh. I can't figure out where to place the glass house. It must be large enough to feed the whole castle, yet always bathed by sunlight. There's simply not enough space. Daenerys gave up on hiding and popped her head up. Castle? She looked at Stannis, crawling upon his lap. My castle? No, it will belong to your husband, he corrected automatically. Stannis, Myra hissed. His eyes widened in confusion. Bloody hells, it was the truth. Daenerys squinted at him. If he'll buy my husband, then it'll be my castle, she explained slowly, rolling her eyes. Again, like Stannis, was the idiot. Yes, God's help you, Jon Snow. That's exactly right, my love, Myra cooed. Stannis eyed her, not sure he was comfortable with the things she seemed to be teaching Daenerys. Is that my castle? She asked, pointing at the miniature of Moat Cailin. He nodded. She frowned and looked back at him. It's very small. Myra laughed. That's just a miniature, my love. The real one is bigger. Oh, she nodded. What's a swamp? Why is it bad and why is my castle on it? Bloody hells, but this girl was too intelligent for her own good. Do not concern yourself with it. I'll take care of everything and there won't be anything bad about it. Well, as long as I can figure out what to do with this. He showed them the tiny dome. It needs to be in the sun because all the food will be grown in it, he explained. Daenerys snatched the wooden figure from his grasp and studied it, then the castle. She placed the dome right over the main keep, in the center of the castle and high above the walls, and nodded. There. Now it's in the sun, Stannis gasped, then shook his head in denial. No, you don't understand. It must be on the ground, in the soil. Plants grow in soil. Well, soil doesn't have to be on the ground, Myra said slowly, eyeing the castle critically. She met his eyes, mind whirling behind her beautiful blue. Yes, you've been meaning to form an alliance with the Reach. My brother Jaehaerys is of age now. He'll need a wife soon. Write to Lord Tyrell with the offer and he can surely find an unwed daughter amongst his lords. As part of her dowry, you could ask for soil from the Reach. If no daughters are available, there are surely other things they lack that we could provide. Then you can simply build the glass house atop the keep and line it with soil from the Reach. It would be plenty of space, and the soil will be rich. Excited now, ignoring his wide, shocked eyes, she continued, the stairs into the garden could directly into the kitchens, and you could even install one of those clever pulley systems to send the food down easily. That way, there will also be more room on the ground to raise livestock. Stannis, speechless, gazed between his beautiful wife and his clever ward. Both were gazing upon his expectantly. He released a breathless laugh. Well, my dears, it seems we've finalized the plans. It will be the most unique castle in Westeros. Daenerys grinned wider, nearly bouncing in his lap. Stannis met Myra's eyes, telling her how much he admired her with her eyes alone. He couldn't wait until the babe came, and he could spend some personal time with his wife. She smirked at him knowingly. Then Myra turned to Daenerys. Now, my love, I believe I said something about reciting High Valyrian? Daenerys immediately wilted and turned to Stannis with begging eyes. He felt himself unwillingly yielding Myra, perhaps. He broke off in response to her glare, then shrugged at Daenerys, who in turn gawked at him in utmost betrayal. Bloody hells, these two would be the death of him. Now, come, my love, it's time. Myra broke off with a pained gasp and grasped her middle. Myra, he asked, standing worriedly with a shocked Daenerys in his arms. Stannis, get Crescent. I think the baby's coming, Daenerys gasped. What? She pointed at Myra's stomach. But how will it get out? Stannis, bloody hells, get me to my room and get Crescent. Daenerys was only 4, so she didn't understand what was happening or why Myra was shouting so much. She sat outside the room, beside her cousin Stannis, who looked scary, but was actually very nice. If a bit dumb sometimes, but Myra told him all boys were kind of dumb. You just had to know how to manage them. People keep trying to get Daenerys to leave, but she wanted to see the baby even if she had no idea where it was coming from. Stannis stepped out of the room a few minutes after he pushed inside, and Daenerys heard Myra shouting again, words angry and screaming. The princess had never heard her cousin sound like that, and she looked wide-eyed at the pale Stannis. He slumped down beside her, despite how he usually said a lord had to sit straight. "You should apologize," Daenerys informed him. He blinked at her in bewilderment. "What? I don't know what a cock is," she explained soberly. "But whatever you did with it must have been horrible if Myra wants to rip it off and beat you with it." She nodded at his gaping, wide-mouthed horror, squinting at the guards at the door who'd begun to cough strangely, and concluded, "So you should apologize." Stannis stared at her for many seconds, and Daenerys wondered if she'd said something wrong. Then her somber cousin exploded into laughter, grabbing her and holding her close. He would stop, then start again helplessly, and the guards kept coughing. Myra was right, boys were dumb. Finally, the doors finally opened, and Cresson came out, looking exhausted but happy. "My lord, would you like to meet your son?" Moss pursed. Jon was only 5 and he didn't know much, but he did know at least 3 things for sure. 1, he was the son of Eddard Stark. 2, he was going to marry Daenerys Targaryen when he grew up. He didn't know why, or why people called her a princess who was not a princess, but he figured he'd understand later. And 3, Robb and the newly born Sansa were his brother and sister. What he didn't understand was who Lady Catelyn was. Robb called her mother, and she called him son and other nice things, and would kiss him a lot. She was also almost always holding the constantly crying Sansa, and would say things like, "Mama loves you, my sweet," to her. But Lady Catelyn never said nice things to Jon. She never said anything to him at all. But she would always look at him with a scowl, so he was too scared to ask her why. Jon didn't understand. He was the same age as Robb. So didn't that mean she was his mother too? All the children in Winterfell had one mother and one father. So if Ned was his father, then Catelyn was obviously his mother. So why was she so mean to him? Maybe he'd done something to her when he was really little and couldn't remember. Maybe he'd bitten her or wouldn't stop crying, and she was mad because he hadn't said sorry. Although he didn't know why she wanted him to apologize from something he'd done when he was too little to know better. It's not like she got mad at Sansa for crying all the time. Maybe he touched his dark hair and then looked curiously at Robb's red hair. Maybe she didn't like him because he didn't look like her, didn't have red hair like Robb or Sansa. But that didn't make sense either, because she seemed to like Ned a lot, and Jon looked just like him. Or maybe she pretended to like Ned because he was her husband and she had to. One day, when she came to get Robb from the maester after he and Jon finished their lessons for the day, yuck, High Valyrian, Jon decided to be brave and ask her. Maybe if he knew what he'd done, he could say sorry, and then she'd kiss him like she did Robb, or say nice things like she did to Sansa. Only his father and Uncle Benjen ever said nice things to Jon, and the first was always busy and the second was away right now. Jon thought it would be really nice if Lady Catelyn would say nice things to him too. So when she picked up Robb and turned to leave, giving Jon only a cold glare, the little boy bravely sprang after her and grabbed her hand. Mother, Lady Catelyn snatched her arm away and whipped around, a horrible look of rage and hatred on her face. "I'm not your mother, you little bastard," she spat. "Do not ever call me that again." Then she turned and strode away, and he met Robb's wide eyes over her shoulder. Maester Luwin kept his back turned as the 5-year-old stood there, trembling. Jon never told anyone about that day, and no one mentioned it again. That night, and many nights after, Jon Snow cried himself to sleep. It was the first time he realized that he was different. "Is it true that she's becoming like the Mad King?" Rena, one of the kitchen maids, whispered quietly. Dano said, "Hush, you stupid girl." The cook, Griffer, hissed, "Don't let no one hear you talking about such a thing. If the princess hears you and starts asking questions, it'll be on all of our heads." Daenerys, who'd been sneaking into the kitchens to steal herself a treat before supper, paused. She was the princess, but the 5-year-old had never heard of this Mad King before. Were they talking about the man on the throne who Myra really didn't like, but who was also Stannis' brother? Daenerys had never met the king, and no one ever talked about him, but if he was mad, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Surely Lady Myra wouldn't allow Lord Stannis to? Rena began. "It's Lady Myra that you'd best be wary of, girl." The Lord don't concern himself with matters inside the keep. Didn't you hear what happened to Lynes? Daenerys frowned. She wanted to know what happened to Lynes too. One day the mousy maid who'd bring their food up to the solar had disappeared, and Rena had been hired in her place. Myra had assured Daenerys that the other girl had returned home to help her family. Did Myra lie? What? Rena gasped. But I, though that was about stealing, the cook sket, and walked farther away. Daenerys sneakily crawled after, keeping the large wooden kitchen table between her and the women. No, the fool started running her mouth off, telling everybody about what she saw one morning and how the princess was turning into her father. How there's a temper in that one, just like the Mad King. Ridiculous, I say. That little girl's sweeter than honey. One little tantrum don't mean she's going mad. All children have tempers, Targaryen ones especially. It's the dragon blood. The only incident Daenerys could remember that she'd been really mad was when she'd asked cousin Stannis for a silver horse, like in her storybooks, and he'd said no. She'd screamed at him and ran away, slamming the door. It had been during breakfast, she remembered. Had Lynes seen it? But Daenerys hadn't done anything wrong. He'd been unfair. She was old enough to learn to ride. Maester Cresson would tell her stories about the Dothraki and how babies grew up on a horse. Daenerys was a big girl. If some Dothraki kid could ride so young, then so could she. Myra made her apologize later, explaining that Daenerys had hurt cousin Stannis, and Daenerys did feel bad about that. She didn't want to hurt anybody, ever. However, what was a more pressing concern at the moment was this Mad King. The women seemed to be saying that that was her father. Daenerys knew she was a princess, which meant that her parents had been king and queen. Myra always talked about her mother, Rhaella, but she'd get quiet when Daenerys asked about her father. Had he been mad? Is that why Myra didn't tell her anything? Why she always went quiet? Will I go mad too? Lady Myra overheard her one time, drove her to right rage. It did. She had Lynes beaten and then dismissed her. Good riddance, I say, Griffa spat. We don't need no gossip stirring up trouble. Beaten? Daenerys was shocked. Myra hurt someone? No, that's impossible, Daenerys assured herself. Myra was the nicest person ever. I had no idea, Rena whispered, making Daenerys strain to listen. Though Lord Stannis was the cruel one, not Lady Myra too. Daenerys gasped silently in outrage. Stannis and Myra weren't cruel. They were the nicest people ever. Oh, bah. Don't be an idiot, girl. The Lord and Lady ain't cruel. They only punish people who deserve it, who break the rules. Daenerys nodded in support. Griffa knew what she was talking about. We have it better than most, remember that. The Lord is fair, though he looks like he's never smiled a day in his life. And Lady Myra would protect all of us if things turn badly. They're good people, but they'll always choose their children first, and that's what the princess is to them. Remember that, and don't be stupid enough to run your mouth off about her. Tirade over, Griffa sighed and turned away. Daenerys used that opportunity to sneak away. She had a lot to think about. As she was leaving, the last thing she heard was, "We don't need the usurper king hearing any rumors and deciding to come for her." The king? Said to be? And what's a usurper? She'd have to ask Maester Cresson. Stannis sat upon his throne, Myra beside him upon a smaller seat, and Davos stood a few rungs down with Cresson. The lords were in attendance, muttering amongst themselves of the news. His Grace, King Robert, first of his name, has ordered me to marshal the fleet and join him in battle, Stannis announced soberly. Myra's mouth twisted in displeasure at his side, and Cresson sighed in despair. We will prepare the ships within the week and set sail for the Iron Islands. My lord, a knight sworn to house Sunglass, stepped forward. The fleet has barely recovered, formed the rebellion. Perhaps it would be best to write the king and tell him we cannot do as he says at the moment, that we need more time to prepare. There were murmurs of agreement, but Stannis knew the real cause of their reluctance. They had no loyalty to Robert, and many probably hoped he'd die in battle. His heir, Prince Joffrey, was still just a babe, and the Baratheon rule was new. If Robert died, taking back power from him was possible. However, no matter Stannis's personal feelings, he'd sworn an oath to the king, and his duty lay there. But he knew his people would resist such an argument. Varys, Robert's master of whispers, knows exactly what our fleet is like, down to the very ship, and all know that we've had a prosperous few years, my lords. Should the king be victorious and find out of the duplicity and our reluctance to heed a royal decree, he will sail here next. Stirrings of unease showed on the faces of Crowd, and one man spat, "Varys, that bloody traitor! Varys is not a traitor!" Stannis was quick to refute, hands clenched. "He serves the king, my lords. He serves the crown. Take care with what you saw amongst so many ears. Let them hear," the Lord of House Massey decreed, his large frame speaking of mixed blood. His angry face bespoke of inflamed passion. "Why should you heed the call of a man who has ignored you? Let them come, I say. We can protect ourselves. You can protect us, my lord." There were shouts of agreement, and Stannis, despite his pleasure at their loyalty, immediately surged to his feet. "Are you suggesting I commit treason, Lord Massey? Against my king, against my brother?" The man turned away, as did many others. "He's not our king," someone muttered rebelliously, and Stannis glared in that direction, although he didn't know who'd spoken. Bloody hells, but Robert was hated in the Crownlands, in his main seat of power, and the reports of his warring and drinking that Stannis was getting with increased frequency didn't endear the man to anyone. It was becoming common knowledge that the king was a fool who ignored his responsibilities, and that the kingdoms were going to shit. The king would rather feast and fuck than rule, he remembered hearing a knight mutter snidely months ago. At least the Mad King could bloody do his job before he went insane. That was ludicrous, of course, but loyalty to the Targaryens was ingrained in these people. They would ignore much, as long as it came from a man who donned a red dragon as his sigil. "The king has disrespected you for years," Myra said quietly, but her voice resonated in the silent hall. All were watching, and he locked eyes with his wife. "Now he seeks to use you and take advantage of all you've struggled to attain. This is the man you call brother. The very man who threatened a baby girl with a fate worse than death right before his court. The man who threatens her still. Perhaps it's time, husband, to look for a new way." Somber nods surrounded him, and Davos was looking decidedly uncomfortable. Stannis sat down with a weary sigh. Myra had never made her wishes, those spoken and those silent, unknown to him. But Stannis was not a man who could break his oath to the crown, to his family, unless he had no other choice. But how could he convince his people that this was the only way to protect themselves? He looked at the gathered highborn gallery, who, despite himself, he'd come to genuinely care about. He wished to know how Lord Maren's wife was faring after a difficult pregnancy, how Justin's son was doing in the training yard, if Lord Aerion had resolved his concerns about his daughter marriage. He wished to ask Lady Dernia on the health of her young daughter. He was concerned whether the Lady Anya had recovered from her illness. Stannis had never cared before, but he couldn't stop now. Yes, perhaps we could protect ourselves. Perhaps we won't need to, and the future will be a very different place after the Greyjoys are defeated. He swept the attentive room. "But would you bet your wives on our victory?" His eyes met Maren's. "Or your children?" He looked to Justin, Aerion, and Darina. All looked away. Then Stannis turned to his wife. "Would you risk Daenerys and Stefan's futures on a gamble against the crown?" Myra held his eyes, jaw clenched, but eventually looked away. He heard a quiet curse pass through her lips. "1 week, my lords, and we set sail. Begin preparations immediately." Stannis, covered in grime, sweat and blood, stood to the back of the gathered crowd as Robert forced Balon Greyjoy to his knees. Eddard Stark stood beside him, face aged and much more somber than Stannis remembered. He knew from their letters that the Northman was having familial difficulties. His younger brother Benjen was scathing towards the Lady Catelyn for her treatment of the Jon Snow, and this was putting a strain on the relationships of all three. "She is my wife, mother to my children, a proper high-born woman, and I force her to share this shame with me. Her emotions are only natural, I understand that. But gods know I wish she could be kinder to the boy. Yet I suppose ignoring him is the best she can do, and I do not blame her for it. Many wives would do far worse, and I have slighted her honor and forced her to face my infidelity every day. I do not begrudge Benjen for his emotions. He loves all my children as any brother would. Stannis had been reminded of Robert, who hadn't even sent a missive when Stefan was born. But I wish he would show more tact, more understanding. Living with the two of them, whenever he returns to update me on how the construction is going, is maddening. I will have to foster Jon soon just to halt it all. Stannis found it odd that Benjen was so involved in Jon's welfare, but he knew his own experiences with his family had poisoned his views of brotherhood, and he'd never understand Northmen. 2 of your sons are dead, Greyjoy, and your pathetic rebellion has been quelled. Robert's voice boomed. Let this day show all skeptics the might of the crown. Robert held his hand out, fist bloody. Balon Greyjoy, so-called King of the Iron Islands, swear fealty to me, King Robert Baratheon, first of my name, and I will spare your life and the lives of your remaining kin. The Greyjoy hesitated, but a knight behind him shoved him forward. Balon's beaten, pathetic form sprawled in form of the king. Stannis couldn't tell what Ned Stark thought of the display. Finally, the old, scrawny man shuffled forward upon his knees and kissed Robert's ring. His lips came away bloody, and he wiped them upon his filthy robe. The men around Stannis cried out in victory, and Robert thrust his fist, warhammer in hand, in the air to proclaim his dominion. Stannis sighed. Could he go home soon? Hear me, Greyjoy. As punishment for your acts against the crown, I will have your son fostered with Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell as a reminder of your loyalty to the crown. Ned didn't react. They must have actually discussed the decree beforehand this time. Greyjoy's head shot up. Your Grace, he is my heir. Yes, and Lord Stark will see to his education and hold him until such a time that you prove your loyalty is absolute. Robert stepped away. Before we all return home, I have 2 more matters to take care of. Come forward, Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone. The men around him stepped away, and Stannis grimly made his way to the king, aware of all the eyes present. He knelt and bowed his head. Your Grace, you have proven your loyalty to the crown and to House Baratheon with your actions. After my master of ships, Lord Crowin, fell in battle, Lord Stannis rallied the royal fleet, his own armada, and the ships from Old Town and House Redwyne, and took command to crush the Greyjoys at sea. The men shouted their support, and Stannis felt annoyance at all the commotion. He'd only been doing his duty. Stannis remembered the chaos that ensued after the Master of Ships, a lord from some house in the Stormlands, fell to Victorian Greyjoy, and he'd reacted quickly to ensure the men stayed ordered and united. They had defeated the Iron Fleet at Straits of Fair Isle, which then allowed them to cross into Pike. All he'd been thinking during the battle was the Iron Islanders were as fierce as he'd heard, and was glad he hadn't chosen the Westerlands to build Deanery's castle. No fleet could take a swamp after all. As a reward for his service, I, Robert Baratheon, the first of my name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm, name you Stannis of House Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, as my new Master of Ships. The men roared their support, while Stannis felt the ground beneath him crumble. Bloody hells, I should have just let someone else take command against Victorian. Stannis was finally content at Dragonstone, and now his brother was once again, for his own convenience, forcing Stannis to upend his life, and he couldn't refuse without it slighting the king in front of his army. Damn you, Robert, will you never discuss a position with me before fucking decreeing it? The man knew what responsibilities Stannis held, because he'd kept the king appraised of all his actions once a month for the past 5 years. Not that Robert ever replied, but he had to have at least read one. He was too bloody busy at Dragonstone, had gained too much momentum to leave it all behind for a post he didn't want. But no, Robert probably thought he was doing Stannis a favor, which only made all this worse, forcing him into the Viper's Pit that was King's Landing. I don't want to play the bloody Game of Thrones. Thank you, Your Grace, Stannis forced himself to say, though clenched teeth. If Robert heard the reluctance, he ignored it. Secondly, the king boomed, turning away. Stannis looked up to see Ned Stark's grim face. He, at least, knew that Stannis didn't want the bloody position. The Crown will hold a grand tourney at Lannisport to celebrate the victory. It would be the greatest feast since we defeated the Mad King. Spread the news, everyone is welcome, and the prizes will be grander than your wildest imaginings." Most of the fools around him cheered, but many looked weary. They, like Stannis, just wanted to go home. Bloody hells, what was he going to tell Myra? "You and the children will stay here, of course. I won't force you to go back to that place. I will return every—" "No," Myra interrupted, halting his pacing. She looked up coolly from Stefan, who she held on her lap. The sleeping boy had Stannis's black hair, but his startling violet eyes were pure Valyrian, and only a few shades darker than Daenerys' own. The princess adored the similarity. She was asleep in the ladies' chambers, which were now unofficially her own, as Myra and Stannis shared the Lord's suites. "We will all go, all four of us." Stannis gaped at her in response. "But I, though you hated, I do," she said, voice cold. "I hate everything about this. It should never have happened." He got the sense that she was talking about much more than just his new position. "But I will not let you walk into that viper pit alone, with only a cruel man calling himself your kin beside you." "Robert isn't. He is cruel to you," she clarified, and he had no response for that. A man who doesn't ask his own brother's opinion, who never responds to his missives, who ignores the birth of his son, that man is cruel. Stannis looked away. Myra rose and carefully placed Stefan in his cradle. She stepped towards her husband and tiled her head up. He kissed her sweetly in response, and feelings as new as the day he'd done it for the first time. He'd never stopped loving this woman. After a few moments, breath ragged, he broke away. "You know what this will mean. You can't dismiss every maid who speaks of Daenerys and the Mad King, not in King's Landing. You can't punish them as you wish." Myra looked down, swallowing. "You knew about that. You never spoke of it, so I thought, the keep is your dominion, wife, and the punishment was just." She shook her head in denial. "I shouldn't have. I felt horrible afterwards, watching her limp away. But when I had her speak of our sweet girl going mad, becoming like that monster, I just couldn't stop myself." He kissed her temple, holding her close. "Gossip is a disgusting habit. It destroys household." "I was so scared," she whispered. So scared that the usurper king would hear the rumor and come for her. Stannis' gut clenched in horror, and he ignored her title for Robert. So scared that Daenerys would come to me one day and ask me why they call her father the Mad King. Because then I would have to tell her the truth, Stannis. I would need to tell her all of it. But I thought, she's too young. She should be carefree for a few years more. He held her close as she trembled. "Then stay here," he said quietly. "Because in King's Landing she will find out. You can't protect her from it, and she's too intelligent for lies. Stay here and give those carefree years." Myra hesitated, and he saw the conflict in her eyes, but then she shook her head. "No. Now you see, the world is a cruel place, but ignorance makes it crueler. I should know. She should see it. The city, the castle, the man who took her family's place." The last sentence was ominous, and Stannis felt stirrings of unease in his heart. "I can't protect her. Keeping her ignorant isn't protection, it's just a way to cripple her." Myra's face hardened, and Stannis knew she'd decided. No, she needs to know. Her legacy, the danger in her blood, the danger that I can't pretend away. She needs to see it, see King's Landing, see what the Mad King has done. Stannis kissed her again. Then he pressed his forehead to her own. "All right, wife. We go together. But we will protect her as she sees. We will help her as she grows up." He kissed her again, lips curling as she grinned weakly at him. "Together we will show her what a king is, and what he isn't."